I am officially fed up. I am officially done with Tyreek Hill. I know we've talked about a potential trade of Hill a lot on the channel, and I've consistently mentioned that it is unlikely to happen because it does not benefit Miami in 2025 due to the Hill financial situation. But with everything that has been going on over the past couple of months and specifically this week, I am fed up with it, and I am willing to move on from Tyreek Hill via trade this offseason, even though it would not benefit Miami for the 2025 NFL season. We'll get into everything and how Miami could look to replace Tyreek Hill on today's show. But I want to know your stance. This week, there was an unfortunate situation that we'll go over here in just a second. But do you want Tyreek Hill to be traded? Type Y for yes or type N for no. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments section. All right, the reason why that I have gotten to this point is one, Hill has been a distraction in the locker room and off the field consistently since he's been in the NFL, if we're going to be honest, but it's really ramped up in this offseason for the Miami Dolphins. But when a couple days ago on Wednesday afternoon, police responded to an assault in progress involving wide receiver Tyreek Hill, well, then eyebrows are going to be raised. And I do want to make something clear. No arrests were made. No charges were made either when it comes to Hill. I read the report. It seemed like it was a lot of screaming, threatening, yelling, but nothing actually turned physical, and the police left with nothing happening. So it's not like he is in trouble, at least to this point, with the law. It's just more or less that with his history, going back to college at Oklahoma State, going back to some things that happened in Kansas City when he was a member of the Chiefs. This is just a history thing with Tyreek Hill. And if I'm going to be honest, I just don't want to deal with it and have it be around this Dolphins organization and be associated with it. Listen, he is the farthest thing that you can possibly have from a leader. He is a distraction in your locker room. And to me, I think Miami is better off wiping their hands clean, moving on from Tyreek Hill, and going in a different direction with the wide receiver room. I know there would be concerns with how the Dolphins' weapons would be this season for Tua Tagovailoa in the offense, but to me, with Mike McDaniel being questioned as a leader in this organization, he has to send a message, and so does Chris Grier, that in the future, this type of stuff off the field will not be tolerated. Send a message. I'm begging you. And that's just where I kind of go with it. Like, I'm done. I want to just be over Tyreek Hill. I just don't think he represents the Dolphins organization the way that the fans want it to be represented. And I don't think that the organization wants to be represented in that way. Neil Driscoll, another prominent social media member on Dolphins Twitter, content creator, said this, and I just completely agree. Only the Miami Dolphins would allow one player to make the entire franchise look like a joke. It's a country club, a disaster. This goes back to right after the offseason when there was reports and Mike McDaniel said they had to fine players multiple times because they showed up late to meetings. There's no accountability. And you want to know why the Dolphins are a soft football team over the last 3 years where they start off good and then tail off in November, December, and January, and they haven't been able to win a playoff game despite being in the postseason 2 of the last 3 years? It's because of that country club kind of lackadaisical locker room. I'm sick of it. You have to have discipline. You have to have accountability. And despite Tyreek Hill being absolutely elite at the wide receiver position over the last 3 years and arguably being a top 5 wide receiver in Dolphins history, despite only playing 3 years because of the numbers he has put up, I just think it's time that you move on. I'm sorry, and I know a lot of people might disagree. Some people might agree with me. Either way, I do not want to have him in this group anymore. I think there is enough talent on this roster to still have a capable and top-notch, at least top-half offense in the NFL without Tyreek Hill. He is still very good at what he does, but I am taking it away from what actually happens on the football field. I'm purely looking at the off the field and in the locker room because I think Miami would be better off without him. And make sure you are subscribed because we'll continue to break down everything when it comes to Tyreek Hill and this Dolphins organization. We're 24 subscribers away from 68,500. Hit that sub button today for daily content, sometimes 2 videos a day. We'll be live for the NFL Draft as well. Subscribe today. And if you've watched our channel, you would know that I have been very adamant about a Tyreek Hill trade not occurring this offseason because it simply just doesn't benefit your football team this upcoming year, and it's a big year for Miami because Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier need to win a playoff game and be competitive this year. And you just look at the numbers on screen. It makes no sense if you trade him before June 1st because his cap hit will go up for this year and you'll be having a lot of dead cap on your hands. Now, you'll still have some dead cap if you trade him after June 1st, but you do lower his cap hit in terms of this season quite a bit, which could allow you to extend some players or sign some players in free agency and maybe front load those contracts if there's some players out there or you want to do some of those extensions. He's only got 1 year left on his deal after this season, and he would be released next offseason regardless. But I just want to get ahead of this. And I know even with a trade, the reason why I've said that it doesn't make sense for Miami is because, one, the financials, but also wouldn't benefit you this season in the NFL draft. You trade Tyreek Hill, the sensible thing would be waiting till after June 1st, which means you're not going to get a draft pick in a 2025 NFL draft class that has some pretty solid wide receivers that you can go out and get. And that's going to be disappointing for Dolphins fans if Miami actually traded Tyreek Hill this offseason. But I'm to the point where I don't think it matters that much anymore. I just want to get him off of this organization and off the roster. So what would his value look like? Well, Barry Jackson, after this situation occurred, came out with an article yesterday where he talked to some people around the league and kind of gauged what the value could be for Tyreek Hill. And Barry Jackson said it was very similar to what Devontae Adams got last year at the trade deadline when he went from Las Vegas to New York. It's a conditional third-round pick that can turn into a second-round pick based off incentives and performances for whatever team Tyreek is on in the next season. And coming up in just a bit, I'll tell you more about how I feel about that trade value. It does not shock me one bit. I'll say that right now, but we'll get into it more depth here in just a second. But I do want to show some love to the official ticketing partner of Dolphins Today, and that is Game Time. Whether you want to go to an MLB game this summer or a concert, comedy show, any live event, Game Time will have you covered. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your tickets, whether it is MLB game or a concert comedy show. They have zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. The all-in pricing feature, when you toggle that, it shows you the total price of your ticket up front, so you have no surprise fees at checkout. Go see a concert in Miami if you're in the local area, whether it's Lady Gaga, Chris Brown, or go see the Marlins play this summer as well. Either way, get your tickets with Game Time. That's how I get all my tickets, whether I'm going to an event in Dallas, because that's where we're located. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. When you talk about the value that we just showed about Tyreek Hill, if you trade him post-June 1st, I got to be honest, I think that's fine value. Because if Tyreek ultimately performs the way that he could perform and he nets you a second-round pick next year, that would be very, very ideal. It would also provide you some flexibility because, hear me out, folks, and now we're getting crazy here, but what if you traded Tyreek Hill post-June 1st, right? You get a conditional third-round pick. So you know that you at worst have a third-round pick in 2026. That's an extra one. Well, what if you then use your own 2026 third to trade for a defensive lineman veteran that could get you some big-time value, whether it's a DeForest Buckner, an Eric Armstead. Now, I'm just throwing out hypotheticals here, but Chris Grier could trade Tyreek Hill to Team X for that conditional third, know that he got that in his back pocket next year, and then flip one of his own picks for a defensive lineman and use the money that you're saving against the cap, which is about $15 million for this upcoming season after June 1st with Hill being off the roster, to absorb that defensive lineman contract. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, it's a far-fetched story, but if I was Chris Grier, I would certainly be trying to do that. And obviously, Tyreek Hill is still wide receiver one on this group, and the question would then become, what do you do with this wide receiver room after moving on from Hill? Because you would just then have Jalen Waddle as your wide receiver one, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine as wide receiver two, Malik Washington wide receiver three, and you don't really have depth behind Westbrook-Ikhine or Washington. And then obviously outside of Jalen Waddle, your wide receiver room would be very, very unproven, and you go from a top 10 wide receiver room in football, arguably top 5, to maybe around league average. So that is where I want to go here next on the show. If I am going to advocate for moving on from Tyreek Hill this offseason, how am I going to replace that to make sure this wide receiver room doesn't fall off a cliff and Miami has adequate weapons? Well, one, I think you could convert Devon Achane, the running back, to more of a wide receiver role. He's been excellent in the receiving game over the past couple seasons for Miami, and then make Jalen Wright and Alexander Madison more of your featured running back combination. Also use Jonnu Smith. Maybe you draft a tight end. Either way. We'll talk about this first because Brett Coleman, someone who analyzes the NFL at a very high level on YouTube, actually tweeted this out. It was after the Tyreek Hill incident. Got reported by Andy Slater saying, I wouldn't rule out receiver for Miami at 13. Obviously, that's the draft choice in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. And although I think it's crazy to draft a wide receiver at 13, and I would not do it, we'll take a look at who those wide receivers could be. But I want to ask you guys this first. Would you consider drafting a wide receiver with the 13th overall pick if you knew you were moving on from Tyreek Hill? Type D for draft. Type P for pass. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Well, if Miami ultimately drafted someone at pick number 13, well, this is who it would be. It would either be one of these three guys. These are the only three that I would consider top 20 picks in terms of wide receivers in this draft. If you do not include Travis Hunter, who's obviously going probably number 2 overall, but Tedoror McMillan from Arizona, Matthew Golden from Texas, and Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State are all intriguing options. And to me, you can make the argument all three of them would fit very, very nicely into this Dolphins wide receiver room as the wide receiver 2 right away to Jalen Waddle. And I'll say this. I kind of alluded to it just a second ago. I would not draft a wide receiver at 13. If you did plan on trading Tyreek Hill and Miami knew they were getting rid of him, I still wouldn't do it because you have bigger needs, a defensive line, left guard, and cornerback right now. They would all still be bigger needs even if you get rid of Tyreek Hill. But as a prospect and a fit on this football team, both Tedoror McMillan from Arizona and Matthew Golden from Texas are intriguing options. Golden weighing in at 5'11", about 185 at the combine, ran a 4.29. He's got relatively solid size with that great speed. Needs to add muscle to his frame to absorb these hits and contacts in the NFL. But his speed would be very appealing to Greer and McDaniel, who obviously prioritize that in their wide receivers and weapons. But then you got McMillan, who's 6'4", allegedly ran a 4.58, 4.6 at the NFL Combine. The Dolphins have been clamoring for a big wide receiver to complement Jalen Waddle. I've seen comps for McMillan in between Mike Evans and Devontae Parker. So 2 different wide receivers in Golden McMillan, but both I think would complement Jalen Waddle quite well. I still would not draft either of them at pick number 13, though. But there could be more of a conversation to be had when it came to the second round at pick number 48. Now, I still think it would be aggressive with the needs at cornerback, defensive line, and safety and offensive line to draft a wide receiver at 48, but these 5 are intriguing options. Eric Ayamanor from Stanford, Jane Higgins from Iowa State, Jack Bech from TCU. We know Kyle Williams from Washington State had a top 30 visit with the Miami Dolphins. Maybe he could be an option at pick 48. I am a fan of Trey Harris from Ole Miss as well, fringe second, third round guy. I think he might be very good in the NFL, by the way. He's one of my sleeper wide receivers. But to me, if I am going to replace Tyreek Hill, I am likely not going to draft one in the top 50. I would go after one of these top free agents still on the board and then complement the signing with a draft pick in the 4th or 5th round. Because there are 4 names out there that I think would help this Dolphins football team relatively solid. Now, you can make the case Deontay Johnson is too much of a headache and just keep your hands away from him. Now, he's not a headache off the field. He is much of a headache inside the locker room and potentially demanding targets. But Tyler Lockett's still unsigned. So is Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen. If you got rid of Tyreek Hill, could you go out and sign one of those 3? I think I would be all in on adding Amari Cooper. He wasn't good for Buffalo when he got traded from Cleveland to the Bills last season, but I think him, Westbrook Ikini, Waddle, and Malik Washington is a pretty solid wide receiver room, especially with what you have in the backfield and at tight end. To me, if you are moving on from Tyreek Hill, I am drafting a wide receiver in either rounds 4 or 5 and then signing a veteran free agent. Ideally, if you could convince Amari Cooper to come to the Dolphins, that's where I would go. I'd sign Amari Cooper to a 1-year deal. Draft a wide receiver in the 4th or 5th round. Because remember, you have 2 4th-round picks and 2 5th-round picks. which gives you ammunition to draft a wide receiver in that range. Whether it's Pat Bryant from Illinois, someone I really like, Nick Nash from San Jose State, another option, Torrey Horton from Colorado State. There's a lot of options in that range that I think could develop nicely in the Dolphins organization. So to me, if I'm trading Tyreek Hill, which I want to do after June 1st, I'm planning on that by signing a veteran free agent and then also drafting one in the 4th or 5th round. That's how I would address the wide receiver room going forward. And whatever Miami does, we will have you covered here at the channel. So hit that sub button, free agency rumors, draft rumors, trade rumors, opinion pieces like this one. Subscribe for the latest around the Dolphins.